Hello, I'm Jonathan Arkin with Naprapatlandslagets. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart. We're talking about ADHD. Now, ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder, is going to be a syndrome that affects a large amount of our children. But the good news is it's also one of the most overdiagnosed conditions that affects our children. As a matter of fact, current estimates are in certain locations up to 33% of school-aged boys are being diagnosed with this, and it can be as high as up to 13% in women. So there is a predilection where more boys get diagnosed than girls do. Now, what happens in ADHD is that the child simply cannot sit still and they cannot pay attention. They can't calm themselves down. Now, the reason why it's so overdiagnosed is because of our modern culture, okay? And this is due to a simple few factors. There are many things that can contribute to hyperactivity, such as sugar intake. One of the things that we do for our children is that we load them up with soda pop, and then we give them white bread and candy, and then we ask them to sit still for 8 hours and pay attention to a teacher who's teaching things that are boring to them. That's not a great recipe for a child to be able to sit still for 8 hours. And honestly, most children just can't do that anyway. So this is one of the reasons why this disorder is becoming so overdiagnosed. But let's step back for a minute, and we're going to talk about the actual disorder when it's real. Now, in reality, it probably does not affect more than 5% of our population. And these children just have a true inability to sit still and pay attention. Now, there's many things we can do for them, and that is involved in several different steps. The first is going to be nutritional. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to start balancing their blood sugar. Because if they're getting these wild blood sugar spikes and these big swings, they're not going to have any success with being able to function normally in society. The second thing we have to do is we have to make sure that they have proper protein intake. Because when you have proper protein intake, what happens is we're able to create these little chemicals inside of our brain called neurotransmitters, which help us calm down. The next thing that we have to do is we have to screen these children for early childhood brain injury, which is surprisingly common. I know most of us think that when the child fell, he hit his head and he cried for 20 minutes and then he got back up, he was perfectly fine. But many times this can negatively affect us. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to make sure that they're safe and they haven't suffered these early childhood brain injuries. If they have, there are very, very specific neurological exercises that we can do for these children. One of the things that we find here at Naprapatlandslagets when we're working with these children is that they have an inability to focus their eyes on a single target. So I've drawn a pretty horrible model up here. Forgive me, I'm a therapist, I'm not an artist. But what you'll actually see very often is that when kids try to focus on, say, the teacher's face, or on a book that they're reading, their eyes will actually be pointing in different directions because they lose the neurological mechanism to make them focus on the same target. This makes it extraordinarily difficult for the kid to pay attention even when they're trying their hardest. So we do specific brain neurological rehabilitation in order to fix this issue among several others. All right. Now, I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was a child. And one of the biggest problems is that I was loaded up with Coca-Cola, I was loaded up with candy and chocolate milk all day long, and then I was given 20 minutes of exercise outside while I was told to sit still in a chair for 8 hours. And I didn't have ADHD. What I had was too much sugar and I was really, really bored, okay? So there are many children who are being diagnosed with this just because they are actually just inconvenient for their teachers. But when we're talking about the actual disorder, these are people who truly cannot function in society. But it's really important for us to recognize that they're not broken. They're not diseased. What they are is they're just displaced in time. 300 years ago, when we were having a camp, we would have to have a watchman who would watch the nighttime to make sure that they could warn the rest of us when we were in danger. This was the person who had to pay attention to every rustling bush, to every little noise to make sure that it kept us safe. These were the ADHD people. This is a normal variance in humankind who just unfortunately has a hard time functioning correctly in our modern society. So it is very deserving of our compassion to help these individuals function in our society. So that's the first thing that we have to do. We have to take our children and we have to make sure that we're taking control of their blood sugar, their protein intake, they are getting adequate exercise, and then if your children is still not responding correctly and they're still unable to sit still and pay attention, then what we have to do is we have to take the next step and look at their neurological function. And many, many times, instead of drugging them, which has been shown to increase anxiety, which has been shown to increase your heart rate, it's been shown to have many, many long-term side effects, what we can do is we can give specific neurological exercises in order to aid them. Now, sometimes people are not responsive to that as well, and they need the allopathic or the medical approach. But we should do everything in our power to make sure that we help our children before we have to go down the more aggressive drug pathway. All right, I'm Dr. Jonathan Arkin here with Naprapatlandslagets. Thank you so much for your attention. Looking forward to talking to you again in the next video.